The bass from the club speakers vibrated through my chest as Hadley thrust another glass of wine into my hand. 27 years old today, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't get drunk. That promise died somewhere around the second bottle we'd ordered for the table. "To Camille," Hadley shouted over the music, her auburn hair wild around her flushed face. The most uptight assistant in the entire city, finally letting loose for once in her boring life. I laughed despite the insult, because she wasn't wrong. 2 years working as Raphael Anderson's executive assistant had turned me into a woman of schedules and silence. I organized his life with military precision, never asking questions about the meetings that ran until 3 a.m. or the contracts written in language so deliberately vague it made my business degree weep. I kept my head down, my mouth shut, and my distance carefully maintained. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight I was just Camille, not the efficient shadow who kept Raphael's empire running. The wine was cheaper than I usually drank, sweet and deceptively smooth. I'd lost count after the third glass. The club lights painted everything in shades of blue and purple, making the world feel dreamlike and unreal. Hadley and our other 2 friends from college were dancing, their movements loose and uninhibited in ways I envied. I excused myself to the restroom, navigating through bodies pressed too close together. The bathroom was a welcome respite from the noise, fluorescent lights harsh after the club's moody lighting. I splashed water on my face, studying my reflection. Dark hair escaped from what had been a neat ponytail hours ago. My carefully applied makeup had smudged slightly, giving me a softer appearance than my usual professional polish. When I reached for my purse to reapply lipstick, my hand met empty air. Panic cut through the wine-induced haze instantly. I spun around, checking the counter, the floor, inside the stall I'd just left. Nothing. My purse was gone. My breath came shorter as reality crashed down. Everything had been in that bag. My wallet with all my cards and cash. My keys to the apartment I'd spent 2 years saving to afford. My identification. The spare phone charger. The small leather notebook where I kept personal notes separate from work. I stumbled back to our table, the music now oppressive rather than celebratory. Hadley was draped over some man I didn't recognize, giggling at something he whispered. Our other friends had disappeared into the crowd entirely. "Hadley," I grabbed her arm, raising my voice to be heard. "Someone stole my purse." She blinked at me slowly, her eyes unfocused. "What?" "My purse. It's gone. Everything was in it." "Oh no." Her expression showed concern, but her body language remained languid, uncoordinated. "Did you check the bathroom?" "Yes, it's not there." Frustration edged my voice. "I need to get home, but I don't have any money for a cab." Hadley fumbled for her own small clutch, nearly dropping it twice before managing to open it. She pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. "This is all I have left. We can split it?" $5 wouldn't get me across town. I didn't even have my keys if I somehow made it to my building. The reality of my situation settled over me like a weight. It was nearly 2 a.m. I was drunk, stranded, and vulnerable in a part of the city I didn't know well. I excused myself again, pushing through the crowd toward the exit where the air might be clearer. Outside, the October night was cold enough to make me wrap my arms around myself. My thin blouse and skirt had seemed adequate inside the overheated club, but offered no protection against the autumn wind. I pulled out the only thing I still possessed, my work phone. Raphael insisted I carry it at all times, a corporate leash I'd resented until this moment. The screen glowed bright in the darkness as I stared at it, my thumb hovering over his contact information. This was insane. I couldn't call my boss at 2 a.m. because I'd gotten drunk and lost my belongings. Raphael Anderson was a man who measured time in billable hours and efficiency metrics. He barely acknowledged my existence beyond the tasks I completed. Our relationship was strictly professional, bounded by contracts and corporate hierarchy. But I had no one else. My parents had passed years ago. I had no siblings. My friends were as drunk as I was, scattered across a club I couldn't even name with certainty. The wine in my system made everything feel both urgent and impossible. My fingers moved before my brain could stop them, typing out a message that sober Camille would never have sent. "Come get me." I stared at the words for what felt like an eternity. 2 words. No explanation, no context, just a plea from an employee who'd never asked her employer for anything beyond her salary. The wine made me brave or stupid. I wasn't sure which. I pressed send. The message showed as delivered, then read almost immediately. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched 3 dots appear, indicating he was typing. They disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. Finally, a response. "Where are you?" My hands shook as I typed the club's name, which I had to step back inside to read from a flyer on the wall. When I returned outside, another message waited. "Stay visible. Outside if possible. 20 minutes. 20 minutes. He was coming. Raphael Anderson, the man who never arrived anywhere without advance notice and a detailed agenda, was driving across the city at 2 a.m. to collect his drunk assistant from a nightclub. I should have felt embarrassed. Should have been mortified by my unprofessional behavior. Instead, I felt a strange flutter of something I couldn't name as I waited on the curb, watching cars pass and checking my phone every 30 seconds. 18 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. I recognized it immediately as Raphael's personal vehicle, not one of the company cars he typically used. The passenger window rolled down, revealing his face in the glow of the streetlights. "Get in," he said simply. I climbed into the passenger seat, the leather still warm from the heater he must have been running. The interior smelled like his cologne, something subtle and expensive that I'd caught hints of when I entered his office with morning coffee or quarterly reports. He looked different than I'd ever seen him. His usually immaculate dark suit was rumpled, tie loosened, top button undone. His hair, normally styled with precision, fell slightly across his forehead. At 34, he maintained the kind of controlled appearance that came from discipline and money. Tonight, he looked almost human. "What happened?" he asked, pulling back into traffic with practiced ease. The combination of wine and relief made words spill out before I could filter them. "Someone stole my purse. Everything was in it. My wallet, my keys, my ID. I couldn't get home and my friends were too drunk to help and I didn't know who else to call and I'm sorry. I shouldn't have bothered you. This is completely inappropriate and unprofessional and... Camille." His voice cut through my rambling, not harsh but firm. "It's fine. Are you hurt?" The question surprised me. "No, just drunk and stupid." "Just drunk," he corrected. "Not stupid. You had one viable option and you took it. That's practical, not stupid." I turned to look at him properly for the first time. In 2 years of working together, I'd never seen this expression on his face. Something softer than the mask of corporate authority he wore like armor. "You were asleep, weren't you? I woke you up." "I don't sleep much." He changed lanes smoothly, heading toward the part of the city where I lived. "You said your keys were in the purse?" "Yes." The reality of that problem hit me freshly. I can't get into my apartment. He was quiet for a moment, his jaw working as if considering options. "You'll stay at my place tonight. Tomorrow we'll deal with the locks and the rest of it." "I can't." I started to protest, but he cut me off. "Yes, you can. It's not a suggestion, Camille. It's 2 a.m., you're intoxicated, and you have nowhere else to go. We'll handle it like adults." He glanced at me briefly, before returning his attention to the road. "Have you eaten anything tonight besides alcohol?" The question made me realize how empty my stomach felt. "Not really. Some appetizers hours ago." He made a sound that might have been disapproval or concern. "I'll make you something when we get there. You need food and water before you sleep, or tomorrow will be miserable." The casual way he said it, as if taking care of his drunk assistant at 2 a.m. was a normal Tuesday night activity, made something warm spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the wine. We drove in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past the windows. I leaned my head against the cool glass, watching buildings slide by. Raphael's apartment was in the opposite direction from mine, in the part of town where old money and new power intersected. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, "for disturbing your night, for being unprofessional, for—" "Stop apologizing." His voice was gentle but firm. "You've worked for me for 2 years without a single mistake, without asking for anything, without causing a single problem. You're allowed one night where you need help." The words settled over me like a blanket. I'd never heard him speak to me this way, with this tone that suggested I was a person rather than a position. At the office, our interactions were efficient and distant. He gave instructions, I executed them. He asked for reports, I provided them. We existed in carefully maintained professional boundaries. This felt different. This felt dangerous. "How did you leave work?" I asked, suddenly curious. "You're still wearing your suit." "I was reviewing contracts when you texted." He turned onto a quieter street lined with upscale buildings. "I left immediately." "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said simply. "I did." We pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a building of glass and steel. Raphael parked in a spot marked with his name, then came around to open my door. I managed to stand without stumbling, though the world tilted slightly when I moved too quickly. He kept a hand at the small of my back as we walked to the elevator, a steadying presence that felt more intimate than it probably should have. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse apartment. No hallway or intermediate floor between the garage and his private space. The apartment was exactly what I would have expected. Minimalist furniture in shades of gray and black, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, art that probably cost more than I made in a year. But there were also unexpected details. Books stacked on the coffee table, a forgotten coffee cup on the kitchen counter, a jacket draped over the back of a chair, signs of actual life rather than showroom perfection. "Sit," Raphael indicated the kitchen island, as he shrugged out of his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "Water first, then food." I obeyed, climbing onto one of the modern bar stools and accepting the large glass of water he placed in front of me. I drank half of it immediately, the cold liquid soothing my wine-dried throat. He moved around the kitchen with surprising competence, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator and cabinets. Within minutes, the scent of eggs and toast filled the air. I watched him work. This man who controlled boardrooms and commanded million-dollar deals, making scrambled eggs in his home kitchen at 2:30 a.m. for his drunk assistant. "You cook," I observed, stating the obvious because my alcohol-fogged brain couldn't manage anything more profound. "I live alone. The alternative is starving or eating takeout every night." He plated the eggs and toast, setting them in front of me along with a fork. "Eat, all of it." The food was simple but perfect, exactly what my stomach needed. I ate slowly, aware of him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern? Curiosity? Something else entirely? "Thank you," I said between bites. "For coming to get me. For this." I gestured at the food. "For not being angry." He leaned against the counter across from me, his own glass of water in hand. "Why would I be angry?" "Because this is inappropriate. Because I'm your employee and I got drunk and called you in the middle of the night like you're my personal rescue service. Camille." He said my name in a way that made me look up from my plate. "You've never asked me for anything in 2 years. Not a favor, not special treatment, not even a day off when you had that terrible flu last winter and came to work anyway because we had the merger presentation." I remembered that week. I'd been running a fever of 102, but the Westbrook merger had been the most important deal of Raphael's year. I'd taken cold medicine and powered through. That was my job, I said. No, that was you going beyond your job because you understood what was at stake. He set down his water glass. So when you send me a text at 2 a.m. asking for help, I don't question it. I come. The way he said it, simple and absolute, made my chest tighten. Why? The wine made me brave enough to ask. I'm just your assistant. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully maintained professional facade. You think that's all you are? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't sober enough to fully process. I opened my mouth to respond, but he shook his head. Finish eating. We'll talk tomorrow when you're not drunk. I obeyed, cleaning my plate while he poured me more water. When I finished, the exhaustion hit me all at once. The emotional roller coaster of the evening combined with the wine and the late hour left me barely able to keep my eyes open. Raphael noticed immediately. Guest room is this way. I followed him down a hallway to a bedroom that was smaller than the master, but still more luxurious than my entire apartment. He pulled back the duvet on the bed, revealing pristine white sheets. Bathroom is through there. He pointed to a door. There's a new toothbrush in the drawer and anything else you might need. I'll leave some clothes outside the door for you to sleep in. Raphael. I caught his arm as he turned to leave, the first time I'd ever touched him outside of accidental contact while handing over documents. Thank you. Really. He looked down at where my fingers rested on his forearm, then back up to my face. For a moment, I thought he might say something significant, something that would change the careful balance of our relationship. Instead, he just nodded. Get some sleep, Camille. Tomorrow we'll fix everything. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. I stood there for a moment, processing everything that had happened. Then I used the bathroom, brushed my teeth with the promised new toothbrush, and found the clothes he'd left outside the door. A soft t-shirt and sleep pants that smelled faintly of his laundry detergent. I climbed into the bed, sinking into sheets with a thread count I could only dream of affording. The pillow was perfect, the room temperature ideal. But sleep didn't come immediately despite my exhaustion. Instead, I replayed the evening. The fear when I realized my purse was gone. The desperate decision to text Raphael. The way he'd come without hesitation, without judgment. The gentleness in his voice as he'd made me food and offered me shelter. The question he'd asked echoed in my mind. You think that's all you are? What else could I be? I was competent at my job, efficient and reliable. But I'd never thought of myself as anything more than a useful employee to Raphael Anderson. He was my boss, nothing more. Except tonight he'd felt like something else entirely. Tonight he'd felt like someone who cared. The thought scared me more than losing my purse had, because wanting anything from Raphael Anderson beyond a paycheck was dangerous territory. He was powerful, complicated, involved in business dealings I didn't fully understand. Getting close to him would mean stepping into a world I'd deliberately kept at arm's length. But as I drifted toward sleep in his guest room, wearing his clothes and full from the food he'd made, I couldn't deny the truth any longer. I'd been keeping my distance from Raphael for 2 years, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. Because every morning when I brought him coffee, every late night when we worked through contracts together, every rare moment when he smiled at something I said, I felt the danger of falling for a man I could never have. Tonight, that carefully maintained distance had shattered with 2 words. Come get me. And he'd come. Without hesitation, without questions, he'd driven across the city to save me. Tomorrow I'd have to face him sober. Tomorrow I'd have to rebuild the professional boundaries I'd maintained so carefully. Tomorrow I'd pretend this night had meant nothing. But tonight, as sleep finally claimed me, I let myself imagine a different possibility, a world where that question, "You think that's all you are?" had an answer that changed everything. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a headache pounding behind my eyes like a bass drum. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't place where I was. The sheets were too soft, the room too quiet, the ceiling too high. Then memory crashed back in waves. The club, the stolen purse, the desperate text message. Raphael appearing like some dark-suited savior at 2 a.m. Oh God. I sat up too quickly, immediately regretting it as the room spun. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to organize the fragments of last night into something coherent. I'd drunk texted my boss. He'd driven across the city to collect me. I'd slept in his guest room wearing his clothes. The professional mortification was overwhelming. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face and trying to make my hair look less like a bird's nest. My reflection in the mirror showed exactly what I felt like. A woman who'd made spectacularly poor decisions and now had to face the consequences. The clothes Raphael had left for me last night sat folded on the bathroom counter. His t-shirt hung loose on my frame. The sleep pants rolled at the waist to keep them from falling off. I looked ridiculous, but I had no other options. When I finally gathered enough courage to leave the bedroom, I found Raphael in the kitchen, dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He was reading something on his tablet while drinking coffee from a simple black mug. He looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. "Good morning. How's the head?" "Survivable." My voice came out rougher than intended. "What time is it?" 8:30. He set down the tablet. "Coffee?" "Please." I slid onto one of the bar stools, the same spot where I'd eaten scrambled eggs in the middle of the night. "I'm sorry about last night. About all of it." Raphael poured coffee into a mug and placed it in front of me, along with cream and sugar. "You've apologized enough. How you take your coffee, I know, but I don't know how you're feeling this morning beyond the headache." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, drawing comfort from it. Embarrassed, mortified, like I want the earth to swallow me whole. That's excessive. He leaned against the counter, the posture casual in a way I'd never seen at the office. "You had your purse stolen on your birthday. You made the practical choice to ask for help. There's nothing embarrassing about that." "I drunk texted my boss at 2 a.m., I pointed out. "You texted someone you trusted when you were in trouble." He took a sip of his coffee. "I'd be more concerned if you hadn't." The matter-of-fact way he said it, as if my trust in him was expected and natural, made something shift in my chest. I studied him over the rim of my mug, seeing details I'd never noticed in our office interactions. The slight shadow along his jaw from missing his usual morning shave. The way his hair fell less perfectly without product. The coffee stain on his otherwise pristine shirt cuff. "You stayed up," I observed. "You haven't slept." "I had work to finish." He didn't elaborate, which was typical. Raphael never explained more than necessary about his business dealings. "On a Saturday morning?" "Business doesn't stop for weekends, Camille. You know that better than most." He set down his mug. "I've already made arrangements to have your locks changed. A locksmith will meet us at your apartment in an hour. I've also contacted the credit card companies to freeze your accounts and ordered replacement cards. They'll arrive by Monday." I stared at him, processing. "You did all that this morning?" "I did it last night while you slept." He pulled out his phone, tapping through screens. "I also filed a police report about the theft and contacted 3 banks to dispute any fraudulent charges if your cards were used. Your new driver's license can be processed Monday morning if you come into the DMV with me. I know someone there who can expedite it." Of course he did. Raphael Anderson knew someone everywhere, had connections that spiderwebbed through the city in ways I'd never fully mapped. "You didn't have to do all that," I said quietly. "Yes, I did." He looked up from his phone, his dark eyes direct. "You're my responsibility. I'm your employee. You're more than that." The words hung between us, an echo of last night's loaded question. I wanted to push, to ask what he meant, but the intensity in his gaze made me look away first. "I need to call my friends," I said, changing the subject to safer ground. "They're probably worried." "One of them texted your work phone around 3 a.m., Hadley Carter. I responded that you were safe and would contact her today." He slid my phone across the counter. The battery was low, so I charged it. Everything. He'd thought of everything. While I'd been sleeping off wine and chaos, Raphael had systematically solved every problem my stolen purse had created. The efficiency was characteristic, but the care behind it felt like something new. "Thank you." The words felt insufficient for everything he'd done. "I don't know how to repay you for all this." "You don't repay me." His voice was firm. "You accept help when you need it, and you know you can count on me. That's how this works." "How what works?" He was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Us. Whatever this is between us." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What is this between us?" Raphael set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. "That's what we need to figure out. But not on an empty stomach. Breakfast first, then we'll deal with your apartment, then we'll talk." The promise of that conversation loomed over breakfast like a storm cloud, both terrifying and thrilling. He made omelets this time, moving through his kitchen with the same controlled efficiency he brought to everything. I watched his hands as he worked, capable hands that signed contracts worth millions, and apparently also whisked eggs. "You're staring," he observed without looking up. "Sorry." I wasn't, but social convention demanded I pretend. I just never pictured you as someone who cooks. Most people don't picture me as someone who does anything normal. He plated the omelet and set it before me. They see the suits and the boardrooms and assume that's all there is. "Is it?" I asked, then immediately regretted the boldness. But Raphael just smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his typically stern face. "If it was, I wouldn't have left an important contract review at midnight to pick up my assistant from a nightclub. Why did you?" The question emerged before I could stop it, raw and honest. "Really?" He sat across from me with his own plate, his eyes holding mine. "Because when I saw your text, the only thing I could think about was getting to you. Everything else stopped mattering." The confession hung in the air between us, more intimate than if he'd touched me. I set down my fork, my appetite forgotten. "Raphael, Eat first," he interrupted gently. "This conversation requires energy, and you need food." I obeyed, though the omelet could have been cardboard for all I tasted it. My mind was spinning with implications, with possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider. After breakfast, we took his car to my apartment across town. The drive was quieter than last night, tension replacing the wine-induced haze. Raphael kept his attention on the road, but I felt hyper-aware of his presence, of the small space separating us. My building looked shabbier in daylight than it had at night. The brick facade needed cleaning, the front door hung slightly crooked on its hinges, and the intercom system had been broken for months. Standing next to Raphael, seeing it through his eyes, I felt the full weight of the class divide between us. "It's not much," I said defensively. "It's yours." He helped me out of the car. That's what matters. The locksmith he'd arranged was already waiting, a competent-looking man with a van full of equipment. Raphael handled the interaction, explaining what was needed while I stood uselessly by, still wearing his oversized clothes. Inside my apartment, I felt both relief and embarrassment. Relief to be in my own space, embarrassment at what that space revealed. My one bedroom was roughly the size of Raphael's living room. The furniture was secondhand, the walls thin enough to hear neighbors, the kitchen barely large enough for one person to move comfortably. Raphael didn't comment on any of it. He simply waited while the locksmith worked, standing by my small window that looked out at the building next door. "This is going to take about an hour," the locksmith announced. "You folks want to wait or come back?" "We'll stay," Raphael answered before I could respond. Once we were alone in my apartment, the space suddenly felt too small, too intimate. Raphael's presence seemed to fill every corner, making the familiar feel foreign. "You can sit," I offered, gesturing to my worn couch. He sat, but his posture remained alert rather than relaxed. I perched on the opposite end, maintaining distance. "We should talk," he said finally. My heart rate picked up. "About what?" "About why you waited 2 years to ask me for help with anything." His gaze was direct, unflinching. "About why you've kept me at arm's length despite spending more time with me than with anyone else in your life." The observation cut too close to truth. "You're my boss. Professional boundaries are important." "They are," he agreed. "But that's not why you've maintained them so carefully. You've been afraid." "Of what?" "Of this." He gestured between us. "Of admitting there's something here beyond professional obligation." I couldn't breathe properly. "Raphael, let me finish." His voice was gentle but firm. "I hired you 2 years ago because your resume was perfect. You were efficient, qualified, exactly what I needed. But within the first month, I realized I'd made a mistake." The words felt like a punch to the stomach. "You want me to resign?" "No." He leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on me. I realized I'd hired someone I couldn't stop thinking about. Someone whose intelligence challenged me, whose silence spoke volumes, whose presence made 12-hour workdays feel bearable. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. "Do you know why I rarely acknowledge you at the office?" he continued. "Why I keep our interactions brief and professional?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "Because if I didn't maintain that distance, I'd cross lines I shouldn't cross. I'd pull you into my world completely, and that's dangerous for someone like you." "Someone like me?" I found my voice, though it came out rough. "Someone good, someone untangled from the complications of my business dealings. Someone who deserves better than what I could offer." His jaw tightened. "I've kept you at distance to protect you, Camille. From me, from my world, from everything that touching me would bring into your life." The confession should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something like anger kindle in my chest. "Don't I get a say in that?" I demanded. "In what I can handle, in what I choose." "Do you know what you'd be choosing?" His voice hardened slightly. "My business isn't just boardrooms and contracts. There are aspects I've deliberately kept you away from. People who would use anyone close to me as leverage. Complications that would compromise the safe, quiet life you've built here." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Safe? My purse was stolen last night. My safe, quiet life left me stranded and vulnerable. The only safety I felt was when you showed up." Something shifted in his expression. "Camille, for 2 years I've told myself I was maintaining professional distance." I interrupted, my voice shaking. "But you're right. I was afraid. Not of your business or your world. I was afraid of wanting you, of caring about you beyond what was appropriate, of lying awake at night thinking about you when I should have been thinking about anything else." Raphael went very still. "You've wanted me?" The vulnerable note in his voice, so at odds with his usual control, made me brave. "Yes." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. Every day, every late night we've worked together, every brief moment you've smiled at something I said, every time your hand brushed mine passing documents. I've wanted you so much it terrified me. He stood, crossing the small space between us in 2 strides. I looked up at him, my heart hammering. "If we do this," he said, his voice low. "There's no going back to how things were. No pretending. No more distance." "I don't want distance," I whispered. "Not anymore." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. "I can't promise easy, Camille. My life is complicated." "I don't need easy." I reached up, covering his hand with mine. "I need real." He kissed me then, and it felt like everything I'd imagined, and nothing like it at the same time. His lips were firm but gentle, questioning rather than demanding. I responded instinctively, my hands finding their way to his shoulders, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt. When we broke apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against mine. "This changes everything," he murmured. "I know." And I did. There would be no going back to simple professionalism, no pretending Monday morning that this hadn't happened. "Is that okay?" "It's terrifying." His honesty made me smile. "And necessary. I've been half alive for 2 years, Camille. Watching you, wanting you, denying myself because it seemed right. Last night when you texted me, I realized I don't want to be noble anymore. I want to be selfish." "Selfish how?" His smile was slight but genuine. "I want you in every way I can have you. As my assistant, yes, but also as my partner. Someone who knows my world and chooses to be in it anyway. Someone who sees the complications and stays." The intensity of his words should have overwhelmed me. Instead, I felt clarity settle over everything. "I'm staying," I said simply. The locksmith's knock on the door interrupted whatever Raphael might have said next. He stepped back, giving me space as I answered. The new keys were ready, 3 copies that I accepted with gratitude. After the locksmith left, Raphael and I stood in my small apartment, everything between us fundamentally altered. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," he said, pulling out his phone, "I take you to get clothes that aren't mine. Then we get you a temporary ID so you can function this weekend. Monday we'll handle the DMV and your credit cards. And somewhere in all of that we figure out what this is between us." "And at work?" The practical question had to be asked. "At work, we maintain professionalism." His expression grew serious. "But after hours, you're mine, if you want to be." The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered me. Instead, it sent a thrill through my system. "I want to be." He pulled me close, his arms solid around me. I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong. "No more distance," he murmured into my hair. "No more distance," I agreed, standing there in my shabby apartment, wearing his 2 large clothes, with my life in chaos from the previous night. I felt something settle into place. The fear that had kept me frozen for 2 years dissolved. Raphael Anderson was complicated, powerful, involved in things I didn't fully understand. But he was also the man who'd come without hesitation when I needed him, who'd solved my problems while I slept, who'd looked at me like I was precious rather than convenient. Whatever came next would be messy and complicated, but it would be real. And after 2 years of careful distance, real was exactly what I needed. The following weeks blurred into a new rhythm that felt both thrilling and precarious. At the office, Raphael and I maintained the same professional dynamic we'd always had. I brought him coffee at precisely 8:15 each morning, scheduled his meetings with military precision, and kept my expression neutral during conference calls where he negotiated deals I only partially understood. But after hours, everything was different. He'd take me to restaurants where the menus had no prices, and the waitstaff knew him by name. We'd talk for hours about everything except work, discovering that beneath our professional compatibility lay something deeper. He told me about growing up with a father who'd built an empire through ruthless determination, about the pressure of inheriting expectations along with wealth, I told him about my parents' accident when I was 19, about putting myself through business school while working 3 jobs, about the loneliness of building a life with no family to fall back on. "That's why you're so self-sufficient," he observed one evening over wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "You've had to be." Is that a compliment or a criticism? It's an observation. His fingers traced patterns on the back of my hand. And an explanation for why you waited so long to ask for help. 3 months into whatever we were calling this relationship, I arrived at work to find Owen Hughes, Raphael's chief legal counsel, waiting outside the office. His expression was grim. "Camille." He nodded politely. "Is Raphael in yet?" He had an early meeting downtown. I unlocked the office door, noting Owen's unusual tension. "Is something wrong? I need to speak with him as soon as possible. It's urgent." My stomach tightened with unease. In 2 years, I'd never seen Owen look this worried. "I can call him—" "No." Owen's response was too quick. "Just have him contact me when he arrives. And Camille." He hesitated. "Be careful." The cryptic warning stayed with me as I went through my morning routine. When Raphael finally arrived at 9:30, his expression told me he already knew something was wrong. "Owen's looking for you," I said as he passed my desk. "He said it was urgent." Raphael's jaw tightened. "Get him on the line. And Camille, hold all my other calls." I connected them, then sat at my desk trying not to listen to the one-sided conversation filtering through the partially open door. Raphael's voice was too low to make out words, but his tone grew increasingly cold as the call progressed. When he finally emerged 20 minutes later, his face was a mask I'd learned meant trouble. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Not here. Can you clear my schedule for the afternoon?" Fear coiled in my stomach, but I nodded. "Of course. Where are we going?" "Somewhere private." He drove us to his apartment in silence, his hands tight on the steering wheel. I didn't push for information, recognizing the signs of a man trying to control something that was spiraling beyond his grasp. Once inside his penthouse, he poured himself a drink despite the early hour. "Wesley Graham is making a move against me." The name meant nothing. Who? Competitor, rival, enemy. Raphael's laugh was bitter. "Pick whichever description fits best. He's been trying to take over segments of my business for years. Owen just informed me that Wesley's been gathering evidence of certain irregularities in my operations." The careful word choice made my stomach drop. "What kind of irregularities?" Raphael was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city spread below his windows. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Money moves through my companies in ways that aren't always straightforward. Contracts get structured to benefit parties who remain anonymous. Deals happen that look clean on paper but serve purposes beyond what's documented." "You're talking about money laundering." The words came out flat, stating what I'd suspected but never wanted to confirm. "Among other things." He turned to face me. "I've never lied to you about what I am, Camille. I told you my business was complicated, that there were aspects I kept you away from. So you've been protecting me from the truth." Something cold settled in my chest. "While I've been organizing your calendar and filing your contracts, you've been running operations that could send you to prison. It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me." I stood, anger overriding fear. "Make me understand how the man who makes me breakfast and talks about building a future together is the same man who's apparently involved in criminal activities." Raphael set down his drink with deliberate care. "My father built this empire in a different time, when the lines between legal and illegal were more blurred. When he died, I inherited not just businesses but obligations. Relationships with people who don't accept being cut off, deals that can't be unwound without consequences." "So you just continued?" My voice rose. "You could have walked away, Cleaned everything up. And do what? His voice hardened. Watch everything my father built collapse? Leave the people who depend on me vulnerable? It's easy to judge from the outside, Camille, but the reality is more complicated than your moral absolutes allow for. The words stung because part of me understood. I'd seen enough of Raphael's world to know it wasn't simple, that power came with obligations that couldn't be easily discarded. But understanding didn't mean accepting. What does Wesley Graham want? I asked, trying to focus on the immediate problem. To destroy me. Raphael's expression was bleak. He's been feeding information to federal investigators, building a case that could take down not just me, but everyone connected to my operations. Everyone? The implication hit me. Including the people who work for you? Potentially, yes. His gaze was direct. Which is why I'm telling you this now. You need to decide whether you can live with who I am, what I do. Because if Wesley succeeds, association with me will become dangerous. I sank back onto the couch, my mind racing. What can you do? Can Owen defend you? Owen's a lawyer, not a magician. If Wesley has solid evidence, legal defense only goes so far. Raphael moved to sit beside me. But there might be another option. What option? Fight back. His voice was cold. Wesley's not clean either. No one at our level is. If I can find his vulnerabilities before he exposes mine, I might be able to force a stalemate. The calculated way he said it made me realize how different his world truly was from mine. This wasn't about right or wrong. It was about power, leverage, survival. What would that look like? I asked quietly. Fighting back? Digging into his operations, finding the irregularities he's hidden, building a case of mutually assured destruction so he backs off. Raphael's hand found mine. It would require resources, time, and someone I trust absolutely to help coordinate it. Understanding dawned. You want me to help. I need you to help. His grip tightened. You know my operations better than anyone except Owen. You've seen the files, organized the meetings, connected the pieces. You're the only person I trust with this. The request should have horrified me, should have sent me running from his apartment and his life. Instead, I felt something else entirely. A fierce protectiveness that overrode my moral reservations. If I help you, I said slowly, I'm complicit. I become part of whatever you're doing instead of just adjacent to it. Yes. He didn't soften the truth. And if this goes wrong, you could face consequences too. Which is why I'll understand if you want to walk away now. I'll give you a generous severance, excellent references, and ensure you're completely separated from anything that might implicate you. It was the second time he'd offered me an out, an escape from the complications of his world. The first time, I'd chosen to stay for selfish reasons, for the connection between us. This time, the stakes were infinitely higher. I thought about the past 3 months, the way Raphael looked at me like I was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. The conversations that lasted until dawn, the feeling of being seen completely for the first time in my life, the terror of losing him. What do you need me to do? I asked. Relief and something like pain crossed his face. Are you sure? No. My honesty made him smile slightly. But I'm staying anyway. Tell me what you need. Over the next hour, Raphael explained his plan. Wesley Graham's empire, like Raphael's, had been built on a foundation that wouldn't withstand close scrutiny. There were shell companies, offshore accounts, deals structured to hide their true nature. The key was finding enough evidence to create leverage. Owen's people are already digging, Raphael explained, spreading documents across his dining table. But they're approaching it from a legal angle. What I need is someone who can see the patterns, connect the administrative threads. That's where you come in. I studied the documents, seeing immediately what he meant. Legal investigation focused on proving specific crimes. What Raphael needed was the kind of comprehensive organizational mapping I'd been doing for his companies for 2 years. "I can do this," I said, confidence growing as I saw the scope of the project. "But I'll need access to more than just what's in the office. Your personal files, the documents you keep separate." "Done." He didn't hesitate. "Anything you need." We worked through the afternoon and into the evening, Raphael ordering food we barely touched while I began building a database of Wesley Graham's business structure. It was like assembling a puzzle where half the pieces were deliberately mislabeled. Around midnight, Raphael's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "I need to take this." He stepped into his bedroom, leaving me alone with the scattered documents. I heard his voice rise, sharp and cold, speaking in rapid sentences I couldn't quite make out. When he returned 15 minutes later, his face was pale. "What happened?" I asked. Wesley made his move. Raphael's voice was tight. "Federal investigators just raided 3 of my facilities. They'll be coming here next, probably tomorrow." My blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" "It means we're out of time." He moved to his safe, pulling out a laptop I'd never seen before. "Everything we need is in here. Financial records, correspondence, the real structure of my operations. I've kept it separate from the office systems." He handed me the laptop, and I understood immediately. This was his insurance policy. The evidence that could save him or destroy him, depending on who controlled it. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. "Because if they raid my properties, they'll seize everything. But they won't look at my assistant's apartment. Not immediately." His gaze was intense. "I need you to keep this safe, study it, find what we need to stop Wesley." The weight of what he was asking settled over me. "Raphael, if they find this at my place..." "I know." He cupped my face in his hands. "I know what I'm asking. If you can't do it, tell me now. I'll find another way." I should have refused. Should have recognized this as the moment to extract myself from a situation spiraling toward disaster. Instead, I thought about the man before me. Complicated and flawed, but also the person who'd shown me what it meant to be chosen, to be trusted completely. "I'll do it," I said. "But Raphael, you need to promise me something." "Anything." "No more secrets. If I'm risking everything to help you, I need to know exactly what I'm protecting. All of it." He was quiet for a long moment, something like grief passing across his face. Then he nodded. "All of it," he agreed. "Starting now." What followed was the longest night of my life. Raphael talked, and I listened, as he laid bare the full scope of his empire. The legitimate businesses that formed its public face, the shell companies that moved money between jurisdictions, the partnerships with people whose names I recognized from news reports about organized crime, the deals that existed in the gray space between legal and illegal, morally defensible, and morally bankrupt. "I'm not innocent," he said as dawn light began filtering through his windows. "I've made choices that hurt people, even if indirectly. I've prioritized profit over ethics more times than I can count. But I'm also not the monster Wesley will paint me as. I've tried to minimize harm, to use my influence for good when I could." "That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of your character," I observed. His smile was bleak. "No, but it's honest, which is more than most people at my level offer." I studied him in the early morning light, this man who'd given me everything I'd been afraid to want, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not the powerful businessman or the careful boss or the attentive lover, but all of it together. Complicated, flawed, ruthless when necessary, and somehow still the person I'd choose over easier alternatives. "Okay," I said finally. "Now I understand what we're fighting for. Not innocence, because you're not innocent. but the chance to rebuild something better from what exists. You still want to help? He sounded surprised. I still want to help. I reached for his hand. But after we survive this, we're rebuilding everything. Your operations, your business structure, all of it. I'm not spending my life protecting something morally indefensible. Relief and something like hope crossed his face. You're talking about a future. I'm talking about our future. I squeezed his hand. If we have one after this, we will. The determination in his voice was absolute. Whatever it takes, Camille, we will. As we sat together watching the sun rise over the city, I understood that the woman who'd drunk texted her boss 3 months ago was gone. In her place was someone who'd chosen to step fully into Raphael's complicated world, who'd decided that loving him meant accepting all of him, darkness included. It was terrifying. It was probably stupid. But sitting there with his hand in mine, the weight of his secrets now mine to carry, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. I'd been staring at Raphael's secret laptop for 6 hours straight when my doorbell rang at 2 a.m. My tiny apartment had been transformed into a makeshift war room. Documents spread across every surface. Multiple screens displaying financial records that would send most people running to federal authorities. Instead, I was running toward becoming an accessory. I checked the peephole, my heart hammering. Raphael stood there, still in his suit from earlier, his expression grim. I opened the door quickly. They raided the office, he said without preamble, stepping inside. Seized everything. Computers, files, my personal effects. Owen's trying to limit the damage, but we're officially under investigation. I absorbed the information, my legal analyst brain already cataloging implications. Did they come here? Not yet. They're working through my properties in order of obvious connection. You're my employee, but not someone they'd prioritize immediately. He looked around at my organized chaos. What have you found? I gestured to my makeshift command center. Wesley Graham is smarter than we thought. His company structure is layered like an onion, each shell protecting another shell. But he got cocky. I pulled up a document on my laptop. 3 months ago, he acquired a logistics company in Delaware. On paper, it looks clean. But if you trace the ownership backward through 4 holding companies, it connects to a freight operation that's been flagged by customs 17 times for suspicious shipments. Raphael leaned over my shoulder, studying the screen. Can you prove the connection? Not yet, but I found the pattern. I showed him the web of companies I'd mapped. He's using the same structure in 4 other acquisitions. Once I document all of them, we can show a systematic pattern of hiding ownership to evade oversight. That's good. He straightened. But we need more than pattern matching. We need evidence of actual criminal activity. I know. I rubbed my tired eyes. I've been trying to find his financial irregularities, but he's buried them well. Every transaction I trace leads to another dead end. Raphael was quiet for a moment. What if you're looking at the wrong transactions? What do you mean? You're approaching this like a corporate investigation, looking for financial crimes, tax evasion, fraud. He sat beside me. But Wesley's real vulnerability isn't his money. It's his ambition. I turned to face him fully. Explain. Wesley wants what I have. Not just my businesses, but my position, the respect, the fear, the network. Raphael's expression hardened. He's made promises to people to get them to turn against me. Promises he can't keep. If we can document those promises, show he's overextended himself, we can turn his allies against him. Understanding dawned. You want to poison his relationships. I want to expose him as someone who makes deals he can't honor. In our world, that's worse than being criminal. It's being unreliable. He pulled out his own phone. I have contacts who've been approached by Wesley. If we can get them to document what he offered, what he guaranteed, We can build a case that he's reckless and dangerous to work with. It was brilliant and ruthless in equal measure. That won't stop the federal investigation against you. No, but it might buy us time. He met my gaze. If Wesley loses his support network, the pressure on investigators to move quickly decreases. That gives Owen more time to negotiate. Negotiate what? A deal. Raphael's voice was flat. I cooperate with certain aspects of their investigation, provide information on other players, in exchange for reduced charges. It's not ideal, but it's survival. The casual way he discussed betraying criminal associates should have horrified me. Instead, I felt only cold pragmatism. This was the world we'd chosen to fight in. Morality was a luxury we couldn't afford. Okay. I turned back to my screens. Give me the names of Wesley's potential allies. I'll cross-reference them with the documents here, see if I can find evidence of his promises. We worked through the night, Raphael making phone calls while I built profiles of every person Wesley had approached. By dawn, we had 12 testimonials, all documenting outlandish promises Wesley had made to secure support against Raphael. He told Marcus Chen he'd get exclusive shipping contracts for the entire East Coast, Raphael reported, reading from his notes. Chen knows that's impossible. No one has that kind of control, but Wesley sold it convincingly enough that Chen agreed to provide testimony against me. Can you get Chen to recant? I asked. Maybe. If I can show him Wesley's promises are vapor. Raphael looked at what I'd compiled. This is good work, Camille. Really good. The praise warmed me despite my exhaustion. I'm just connecting dots. You're the one who knew where to look. We make a good team. His hand found the back of my neck, massaging the tension there. But you need rest. You've been at this all night. So have you. I'm used to it. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. Owen, I need to take this. He stepped into my small bathroom for privacy. I used the break to stand and stretch, my body protesting hours of immobility. Through the thin walls, I could hear my neighbor's television, a morning news show discussing something that seemed impossibly distant from my current reality. When Raphael emerged, his face was carefully neutral, which I'd learned meant bad news he was trying to control. What happened? I asked. The investigators want to interview you. His voice was tight. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. They're calling in everyone who works closely with me. My stomach dropped. What should I tell them? The truth, mostly. He moved closer. You're my assistant. You organize my schedule, file my paperwork, handle routine correspondence. You don't know the details of my business dealings beyond what's necessary for your job. But I do know. I gestured at the laptops surrounding us. I've spent the past 18 hours learning exactly how your empire works. They don't know that. His hands came to rest on my shoulders. Camille, when they interview you, you need to be the efficient assistant who follows orders without questioning them, not the woman who spent the night building a counterintelligence operation. You want me to lie to federal investigators. I want you to protect yourself. His grip tightened slightly. This is already dangerous enough. If they realize how deeply you're involved in helping me, you could face charges too. The concern in his voice was genuine, but so was my understanding of the situation. If I lie and they catch me, it's worse than if I'm honest about being your assistant but vague about details. Then be vague. He pulled me closer. Be the woman who shows up, does her job well, and goes home without involving herself in anything questionable. I stopped being that woman the moment I agreed to help you, I pointed out. Raphael's expression softened. I know, and I'm sorry for putting you in this position. Don't apologize for something I chose. I rested my forehead against his chest. Just tell me how to get through tomorrow without making things worse. We spent the next hour rehearsing, Raphael playing the role of hostile investigator, while I practiced answering questions in ways that were technically truthful, but revealed nothing useful. It felt like learning a new language, one where every word had to be weighed for potential consequences. "What is your relationship with Mr. Anderson?" Raphael asked in a cold, official tone. "He's my employer. I've been his executive assistant for 2 years. And outside of work?" I hesitated, and Raphael broke character. "That's where it gets tricky. They'll have seen us together at restaurants, maybe even have photos. Denying a personal relationship will backfire if they have evidence." "So I admit we're involved?" "You admit to a professional relationship that evolved into something personal." He chose his words carefully. "But you maintain that you know nothing about the business aspects they're investigating. Your relationship is separate from his work." Will they believe that? Probably not. His honesty was brutal. But it's defensible. A lot of people date their bosses without becoming involved in criminal enterprises. The clinical way he said it made me laugh despite the situation. "Is that what we're doing? Dating?" "That's the least complicated word for it." A slight smile crossed his face. "Among other options that would sound worse to federal investigators." My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I'd set days ago. Raphael's mother's birthday was in 2 days. The normalcy of the reminder in the midst of our current crisis felt surreal. "Your mother's birthday is Wednesday," I said. "Did you want me to order flowers like last year?" Raphael blinked, clearly having forgotten entirely. "Camille, we're in the middle of a federal investigation. My mother's birthday is the least of our concerns. Maintaining normalcy is important. I made a note to order flowers anyway. If you suddenly stop doing routine things, it looks like consciousness of guilt." He studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "How are you this calm?" "I'm not calm. I'm terrified." I met his gaze steadily. "But falling apart won't help either of us, so I'm focusing on what I can control." "Which is?" "Preparing for tomorrow, building our case against Wesley, keeping your life running despite the chaos." I gestured at my organized documents. "Being useful." Raphael pulled me into a kiss that tasted like desperation and gratitude in equal measure. "You're more than useful. You're essential." The word settled over me with unexpected weight. Essential. Not just to his business operations, but to his survival. The responsibility should have crushed me. Instead, it crystallized my resolve. "Then let's make sure we both survive this," I said against his lips. We spent the rest of the day preparing. Raphael made calls to his various contacts, carefully repositioning alliances and testing loyalties. I continued mapping Wesley's operation, finding more evidence of promises that couldn't be kept, of a house of cards built on ambition rather than substance. By evening, we had something resembling a strategy. Owen would use the testimonials Raphael gathered to demonstrate Wesley's unreliability to key investigators. I would navigate my interview without revealing my deeper involvement, and we'd continue building our case, looking for the one piece of evidence that would definitively prove Wesley's operation was more criminal than Raphael's. "It's not much of a plan," I observed as we reviewed everything. "It's better than nothing." Raphael closed his laptop. "And it's all we have." He stayed that night, neither of us willing to be alone with our fears. We didn't talk about the interview tomorrow, or the investigation, or any of it. Instead, we lay in my narrow bed, holding each other while the city sounds filtered through my thin walls. "Camille," Raphael said into the darkness, "if tomorrow goes badly, if they arrest me or charge you, don't." I pressed my fingers against his lips. "We'll deal with whatever happens when it happens. Tonight, we're just two people who chose each other." His arms tightened around me. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." I smiled against his shoulder. "But you have me anyway." Sleep came in fits and starts, anxiety making rest nearly impossible. Every time I dozed off, I dreamed of cold interrogation rooms and questions I couldn't answer. When my alarm finally went off at 7 a.m., I felt like I'd been awake all night. Raphael made me breakfast while I showered and dressed in my most professional outfit. A navy suit I'd bought for job interviews years ago, conservative and forgettable. I needed to look like someone's assistant, not someone's partner in counterintelligence. "Remember," Raphael said as we finished eating. "Vague but truthful. Professional but not robotic. You're nervous because being interviewed by federal investigators is nerve-wracking, not because you're hiding something." I am hiding something. They don't know that. He squeezed my hand. "Trust yourself, Camille. You're smarter than anyone in that room will expect." The words carried me through the morning as I took a cab to the federal building downtown. Raphael couldn't accompany me without making things look worse. I was on my own. The waiting room was sterile and cold, designed to make people uncomfortable. I sat with my hands folded, practicing the breathing techniques Raphael had taught me, projecting calm I absolutely didn't feel. "Ms. Reyes?" A woman in a severe suit appeared in the doorway. "We're ready for you." I followed her into an interrogation room that matched every television show I'd ever seen. Metal table, uncomfortable chairs, mirror that was obviously one-way glass. 2 investigators waited, a man and a woman, both with expressions of professional neutrality. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Reyes," the woman said. "I'm Agent Morrison. This is Agent Chen. We have some questions about your employment with Raphael Anderson." "Of course." I kept my voice steady. "I'm happy to help however I can. How long have you worked for Mr. Anderson?" 2 years. I started as his executive assistant in October 2 years ago. "And what does that position entail?" I explained my duties, keeping my answer focused on administrative tasks, scheduling meetings, managing correspondence, organizing travel. All true, all boring, all revealing nothing about the deeper operations. "Did you ever handle financial transactions for Mr. Anderson?" Agent Chen asked. "I processed expense reports and maintained some budgets, yes. But I didn't have direct access to accounts or authority to move money." Also true. Raphael had deliberately kept me away from the financial aspects that were most legally problematic. "What about meetings?" Agent Morrison leaned forward. "Did you attend meetings with Mr. Anderson?" "Sometimes to take notes. Mostly I scheduled them without attending." "Did the nature of these meetings ever concern you?" This was the trap question. I took a breath, considering my answer carefully. Mr. Anderson operates multiple businesses across various industries. Some meetings were confidential due to competitive concerns. That's normal in corporate environments. I met her gaze steadily. "If you're asking whether I suspected illegal activity, the answer is no. I organized his schedule. I didn't have insight into the strategic or legal implications of his business decisions." The lie tasted bitter, but it was defensible. A good assistant wouldn't question their employer's dealings beyond what was necessary for their job. The interview continued for another hour, Agent Morrison and Agent Chen probing for weaknesses in my story, trying to find inconsistencies or admissions. I stuck to my carefully rehearsed responses, playing the role of efficient employee who knew her place. Finally, Agent Morrison closed her notebook. "Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Reyes. We may need to speak with you again." "Of course." I stood, relieved it was over. "I'm happy to help your investigation." As I left the federal building, my phone buzzed immediately. Raphael's text was brief. "How did it go?" "Fine," I typed back. "I'll explain when I see you." But as I walked back toward my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that fine was a temporary state. The investigation was far from over, and my interview had been just the opening move in a much longer game. A game where the stakes were our freedom, our future, and everything we'd risk to protect each other. 3 weeks after my federal interview, I'd become someone I barely recognized. By day, I maintained my role as Raphael's assistant, showing up to the office that had been partially returned to us after the initial raid. By night, I transformed into something else entirely. Strategist, investigator, the person building the case that might save us both. The toll showed in the mirror each morning. Dark circles shadowed my eyes despite concealer. I'd lost weight from skipped meals and stress. My hands trembled when I held coffee cups, a constant reminder of the adrenaline that had become my baseline state. Raphael noticed, of course. He noticed everything about me now. "You need to rest," he said one evening as we reviewed documents in his apartment. It had become our routine, working until midnight or later, then falling into exhausted sleep, tangled together like we could protect each other from what was coming. "I'll rest when this is over." I highlighted another suspicious transaction in Wesley Graham's financial records. "Look at this. He moved $3 million through a shell company in the Caymans, the same week he promised Marcus Chen exclusive shipping contracts. He's funding his promises with money that doesn't exist in any legitimate account." Raphael studied the document, his expression calculating. "Can you trace where the money came from?" "Not yet, but I'm getting closer." I pulled up another screen. "He's been moving funds between accounts so quickly that he's leaving digital fingerprints. He thinks he's being clever, but he's actually creating a trail." "How long until you can document the complete pattern?" "Maybe a week, 2 at most." I rubbed my temples, fighting off the headache that had been my constant companion. The question is whether we have that much time. Raphael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face hardening. "Owen. He's been in negotiations with the federal prosecutors." "And?" "They're offering a deal. I provide detailed testimony about my operations and associates in exchange for reduced charges. 3 years minimum, possibly 5 depending on what they can prove." The numbers hit me like a physical blow. 3 to 5 years. Raphael in prison, his empire dismantled, everything we'd been fighting for destroyed anyway. "No." The word came out fierce. "There has to be another option." "Camille." "No," I repeated, standing up from the table. "We're not done yet. I'm close to proving Wesley's entire operation is fraudulent. Once we have that, once we can show the investigators that he's been manipulating them, using them to take you down while he's running something worse. Even if we prove that, it doesn't make what I've done legal." Raphael's voice was gentle but firm. "At best, it creates reasonable doubt. At worst, we both go down for different crimes. Then we make sure it's not worst case." I moved to stand before him. "Raphael, I didn't quit my safe job and risk federal charges to watch you take a plea deal. We're smarter than Wesley Graham. We just need to prove it." Something shifted in his expression, pride mixing with concern. "When did you become so ruthless?" "The moment I chose you over easy." I leaned down, kissing him with an intensity born of desperation and determination. "Now stop talking about prison and help me find the connection we're missing." We worked until 3 a.m., fueled by coffee and stubbornness. And finally, buried in a subsidiary company's quarterly report, I found it. "Raphael." My voice was sharp with excitement. "Look at this." He came to stand behind me, reading over my shoulder. "What am I looking at?" "This logistics company Wesley acquired 3 months ago? The one I flagged for suspicious customs reports?" I pointed at a line item in their expenses. "They're paying rent on warehouse space in New Jersey. But according to public records, that warehouse is owned by the Volkov family." Raphael went very still. "The Volkovs. You know them?" "Everyone in our world knows them." His voice was grim. "Russian organized crime. They've been trying to expand into legitimate shipping for years. If Wesley's in business with them, then he's involved with people far more dangerous than anything you've done." I pulled up more documents. "And look at this. The rent payments started small, but they've tripled in the past month. Wesley's not just using their warehouse. He's partnering with them." Raphael's mind was already racing ahead. "If we can prove that connection, If we can show investigators that Wesley is actively working with known organized crime figures, then suddenly your financial irregularities look a lot less interesting than his alliance with the Russian mob. I finished his thought. But we need solid proof. More than just rent payments. I might know someone who can help with that. Raphael pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. Dmitry Petrov. He used to work for the Volkovs before he went independent. If anyone would know about their business arrangements, it's him. Can you trust him? No. Raphael's answer was honest. But I can pay him, which in our world is more reliable than trust. The meeting with Dmitry Petrov was arranged for 2 days later at a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign. Raphael insisted I come along, saying Dmitry was more likely to be forthcoming if he understood we were serious. Dmitry turned out to be a compact man in his 50s, with cold eyes and an accent that made his English sound like a threat. He greeted Raphael with the familiarity of old acquaintances who'd never been friends. Raphael Anderson. Dmitry's smile showed too many teeth. I hear federal investigators are very interested in you these days. And I hear you're no longer employed by the Volkov family. Raphael's tone matched Dmitry's casual danger, which means you might be interested in information that benefits us both. Perhaps. Dmitry's gaze shifted to me, assessing. And who is this? My associate. Raphael's hand found the small of my back, possessive. She's been investigating Wesley Graham's operations. Ah, Wesley. Dmitry's expression soured. Ambitious man, too ambitious, makes promises he cannot keep. Like promises to the Volkovs? I asked, finding my voice despite my nerves. Dmitry studied me with new interest. You are perceptive. Yes. Wesley Graham promised the Volkov family access to shipping channels he does not control. Promised to move their goods through ports where he has no authority. Very foolish. Can you document that? Raphael leaned forward. Written communications, records of meetings, anything that proves Wesley's working with them? I could. Dmitry sipped his vodka thoughtfully. But such information is valuable. What do you offer in return? $200,000. Raphael's voice was flat. And my guarantee that when this is over, I'll owe you a favor. That's worth more than money in the long run. Dmitry considered this, his expression calculating. Finally, he nodded. 300,000. And you introduce me to your federal contacts. I have information about other Volkov operations that might interest them. Information that could make me valuable as informant. You want witness protection. I understood immediately. I want insurance policy. Dmitry's smile was cold. Working for Volkovs is profitable until they decide you know too much. I would prefer to retire with my throat uncut. Raphael and I exchanged glances. This wasn't what we'd expected, but it might actually be better. If Dmitry became a federal informant specifically about the Volkovs, his testimony about Wesley's connection to them would carry official weight. Deal, Raphael said. But we need the documentation within 48 hours. You will have it. Dmitry stood, extending his hand. Pleasure doing business with you, Raphael Anderson. I hope we both survive what comes next. After he left, I let out the breath I'd been holding. Did that really just happen? Welcome to my world. Raphael's expression was somewhere between amused and grim, where alliances shift faster than you can track them, and everyone's playing 3 different games simultaneously. I hate your world. I know. He pulled me closer. But you're very good at navigating it anyway. The documents Dmitry provided 48 hours later were everything we'd hoped for and more. Detailed records of Wesley's promises to the Volkovs. Communications showing he'd guaranteed them access to shipping routes he didn't control. Financial transfers that proved the partnership went far beyond simple warehouse rental. This is it, I said, reviewing the files for the 3rd time. This is what we need. Owen Hughes agreed when we brought him the evidence. For the first time since the investigation began, hope flickered in his expression, If we present this correctly, he said, spreading the documents across his conference table, we can argue that Raphael was a target of convenience. Wesley needed him removed to expand his own criminal enterprise with the Volkoffs. The federal investigation has been weaponized by someone far more dangerous than their original target. Will they believe that? I asked. They'll have to investigate it. Owen's smile was sharp. And once they start investigating Wesley's Volkov connection, Raphael's financial irregularities become secondary, especially if we offer Raphael's cooperation in building a case against actual organized crime. So, instead of being the target, I become the witness. Raphael's voice was flat. I still have to testify, still have to burn bridges and make enemies. Yes. Owen didn't soften the truth. But you do it from outside a prison cell, and you get to rebuild afterward. Raphael was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at me. What do you think? The question surprised me. You're asking my opinion? You're the one who built this case, who found the connections, who convinced me to fight instead of accepting defeat. His gaze was intense. So yes, I'm asking your opinion. Is this the right move? I thought about everything we'd been through. The late nights, the fear, the risk we'd both taken. I thought about the empire Raphael had inherited and the choices he'd made to protect it. I thought about the future we might still have if we survived this. I think, I said carefully, that you've been trying to maintain something built on a foundation that was always going to crack. Your father's empire, his methods, his compromises. This is your chance to start over, to build something new that's actually yours. And if that means betraying people who trusted my father, your father's debts aren't yours to pay forever. I moved closer to him. At some point, you have to choose his legacy or your future. You can't have both. Raphael absorbed this, his jaw working. Finally, he turned to Owen. Set up the meeting. I'll cooperate. But I want immunity for Camille. Complete and total immunity. Whatever she's done to help me, it gets erased. Raphael, I started to protest. Non-negotiable. His voice was firm. She's brilliant and brave and deserves better than federal charges for helping me survive my own mistakes. Make it happen, Owen. Owen nodded. I'll add it to the negotiations. The federal prosecutors agreed to meet 1 week later. In the interim, Raphael systematically began dismantling the more questionable aspects of his operations. Shell companies were dissolved. Problematic partnerships quietly ended. Financial structures reorganized to be as transparent as possible. I should have done this years ago, he admitted one evening as we reviewed the changes. Built things right from the start instead of inheriting my father's compromises. You're doing it now. I squeezed his hand. That counts. The night before his meeting with federal prosecutors, neither of us could sleep. We lay in Raphael's bed, holding each other in the darkness, both knowing everything was about to change. Whatever happens tomorrow, Raphael said quietly, I want you to know something. What? I hired you because your resume was perfect, efficient, qualified, exactly what I needed. His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder, but I kept you because you made me want to be better. Not just better at business, but better as a person. You saw potential in me I'd forgotten existed. Tears pricked my eyes. Raphael, let me finish. His voice was gentle. Tomorrow I might lose everything. My company, my reputation, my freedom if the deal falls through. But if I keep you, if you still choose me after all of this, then I haven't really lost anything that matters. I turned to face him in the darkness. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. His voice held vulnerability I'd never heard before. Promise that no matter what happens tomorrow, we stay together. I promise. I kissed him, tasting salt from tears I wasn't sure were his or mine. We started this together. We'll finish it together. The next morning, Raphael dressed in his most conservative suit, armor for the battle ahead. I went with him to Owen's office, where the federal prosecutors would present their final offer. Agent Morrison and Agent Chen were already there, along with their supervisor and 2 attorneys from the Justice Department. The room felt crowded and tense. Mr. Anderson. The supervisor, a stern woman named Williams, nodded to Raphael. We've reviewed the evidence you provided about Wesley Graham's operations. It's concerning. Concerning enough to reconsider your case against me? Raphael's voice was controlled. Concerning enough to discuss alternatives. Williams opened a folder. We're prepared to offer full immunity in exchange for your complete cooperation in investigating Graham's connection to the Volkov organization. That includes detailed testimony, access to your records, and ongoing consultation as we build our case. And Camille? Raphael gestured to me. Ms. Reyes receives immunity as well? Williams glanced at me briefly. Ms. Reyes hasn't been charged with anything. She won't be charged with anything, Raphael said firmly. That needs to be in writing. Complete immunity for any assistance she provided me during your investigation. Agent Morrison looked like she wanted to object, but Williams raised a hand. Fine. We'll include her in the immunity agreement. But Mr. Anderson, you need to understand what cooperation means. We'll need names, documents, testimony about everyone you've worked with. People will go to prison based on what you tell us. I understand. Raphael's voice was steady. Some of those people deserve to go to prison. Others are just trying to survive in a complicated world. I'll help you tell the difference. The negotiation continued for another 3 hours, attorneys on both sides hammering out details and protections. By the time we left Owen's office, Raphael had signed agreements that would reshape his entire life. How do you feel? I asked as we stood on the sidewalk outside. Like I just burned down everything my father built. He looked up at the sky, clear and bright despite the autumn chill, and strangely okay about it. What happens now? Now, he said, taking my hand. We rebuild. My legitimate businesses stay intact. The problematic ones get dismantled properly, and we start fresh, building something that's actually defensible. We? I emphasized the word. He turned to me, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. You've been my partner through the worst of this. Why would I want anyone else beside me for what comes next? Standing there on the sidewalk, the weight of the past months finally lifting, I understood that this was the moment everything had been leading to. Not the dramatic rescue or the desperate investigation, but this quiet acknowledgement that we'd become something neither of us had planned. Okay, I said simply. Let's build something better. Raphael kissed me there on the busy sidewalk, neither of us caring who saw. When we finally broke apart, both of us were smiling. There's something I need to do first, he said. Come with me. He drove us to a part of the city I didn't recognize, stopping in front of a small jewelry store tucked between a bakery and a bookshop. Inside, the proprietor greeted Raphael like an old friend. Mr. Anderson, I've been expecting you. The jeweler produced a small velvet box, just as you specified. Raphael opened the box, revealing a ring that took my breath away. Not ostentatious or massive, but perfect. A single diamond set in a delicate band that looked like it had been designed specifically for my hand. He turned to me, the box still open. I had this made 3 weeks ago, before we knew how the investigation would end. Because regardless of what happened with federal prosecutors, or Wesley Graham or any of it, I knew I wanted forever with you, My heart hammered against my ribs. Rafael, Camille Reyes. He took my hand, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. You're the bravest, most brilliant person I've ever met. You've stood with me through darkness, helped me find light, and made me believe I could be better than my worst choices. Will you marry me? I should have worried about timelines or propriety or any number of practical concerns. Instead, I thought about the man before me, flawed and complicated, but also honest in ways that mattered most. Someone who'd trusted me with his darkest secrets, and then worked to become worthy of that trust. Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Rafael never did anything without meticulous planning. We stood there in the small jewelry store, holding each other while the proprietor beamed, and the world continued outside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The investigation would continue. Rafael's testimony would make enemies, and rebuilding his empire from more ethical foundations would be complicated and difficult. But we'd face it together. Not as boss and assistant, not even just as partners, but as something deeper. Two people who'd chosen each other through the worst and were ready to build the best. The next 6 months transformed everything. Wesley Graham was arrested on 12 federal charges, including racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and partnership with known organized crime figures. The evidence we'd compiled, combined with Dmitry Petrov's testimony and Rafael's cooperation, built a case so airtight that Wesley's lawyers advised him to take a plea deal. 20 years minimum. The man who'd tried to destroy Rafael ended up destroying himself. Rafael's testimony proved invaluable to federal investigators, helping them understand the complex web of relationships and obligations that defined the world he'd inhabited. He drew clear lines between those who were genuinely dangerous and those who'd been trapped by circumstance, earning grudging respect from prosecutors who'd expected a typical criminal turning on his associates scenario. But the real work happened in the aftermath. Dismantling the problematic aspects of Rafael's empire while preserving what was legitimate proved more complex than anyone anticipated. That's where I came in. This logistics subsidiary, I said during one of our countless strategy meetings, has legitimate contracts with 3 major retailers. We can't just dissolve it without breaching those contracts and opening us to lawsuits. Owen nodded, making notes. So we restructure instead of dissolve. New ownership structure, complete financial transparency, independent board oversight. Exactly. I pulled up another document. Same with the shipping operation. The business itself is legal. We just need to completely overhaul how it's managed. Rafael watched me work with an expression I'd learned to recognize, pride mixed with something deeper. We'd been engaged for 4 months, but we'd postponed wedding planning until the worst of the legal complications were resolved. You're brilliant at this, he observed after Owen left. I'm organized. I closed my laptop. There's a difference. No, you're brilliant. He pulled me onto his lap, a gesture that had become natural over months of working side by side. You see patterns and possibilities I miss. You understand how to rebuild structures I only knew how to inherit. I kissed him, soft and brief. We make a good team. The best team. His arms tightened around me. Which is why I have a proposition for you. Another one? I raised an eyebrow. You've already convinced me to marry you and restructure your entire corporate empire. What's left? Partner with me. Officially. He shifted so we were face to face. Not as my assistant or my fiancé, though you're both of those. As my business partner, co-CEO of the new Anderson Enterprises. I stared at him. Rafael, I don't have the capital to... I'm not asking you to buy in. I'm offering you equity as recognition of what you've already contributed. His expression was serious. Everything we've rebuilt, you've been essential to. The new corporate structure, the ethical oversight, the relationships with legitimate partners who actually trust us now. That's your work as much as mine. People will say you're just giving it to me because we're engaged. Let them say whatever they want. His voice was firm. I know the truth. You've earned this position. You've proven yourself more capable than anyone I've ever worked with. And frankly, I trust your judgment more than my own at this point. The offer was staggering. Not just the financial implications, but what it represented. Raphael was proposing we build something entirely new together, a true partnership in every sense. On one condition, I said finally, name it. We establish real oversight. Board members who aren't on your payroll, independent auditors who report publicly, complete financial transparency. I met his gaze steadily. If we're rebuilding, we do it right. No shadows, no compromises. Something like relief crossed his face. I was hoping you'd say that. Were you testing me? No. I was making sure we were aligned. He kissed me gently. I don't want to build another empire that requires constant defending. I want to build something we can be proud of. Then yes. I smiled. I'll be your partner. The announcement of my promotion from assistant to co-CEO caused exactly the stir Raphael had predicted. Business journalists questioned my qualifications. Social media speculated about nepotism and inappropriate relationships. Several of Raphael's former associates called to express concern that he was making emotional decisions rather than strategic ones. Raphael's response was characteristically direct. He released a statement detailing my role in restructuring the company, including specifics about the systems I'd designed and the relationships I'd rebuilt. He provided testimony from Owen and other executives about my competence, and he made it clear that anyone who couldn't accept my position was welcome to sever their business relationships with Anderson Enterprises. You didn't have to do all that, I said after reading his statement. Yes, I did. He was reviewing contracts at his desk, now our desk. In the office, we'd redesigned to accommodate both of us. I won't have people dismissing your achievements because they're uncomfortable with our relationship. Some of them have legitimate concerns about professional boundaries. And I address those by providing evidence of your qualifications. He looked up. Camille, you need to stop minimizing your own abilities. You're not my assistant anymore. You're my equal partner. Start acting like it. The bluntness made me laugh. That's quite a tone to take with your fiancé key and business partner. Someone has to push you past your imposter syndrome. But he smiled. Though I'll try to be more diplomatic in board meetings. Adjusting to the new dynamic took time. I'd spent 2 years deferring to Raphael professionally, and shifting to actual partnership required conscious effort. But gradually I found my footing. In board meetings, I challenged his proposals when I disagreed. In negotiations, I presented my own strategies, rather than simply supporting his. In the office, we shared, we debated and compromised, and occasionally argued like actual equals. The business community's perception shifted too, as people realized I wasn't just a decorative partner, but someone who genuinely understood corporate restructuring and ethical business practices. Trade publications started asking for my perspective on business ethics. I was invited to speak at conferences about rebuilding trust after crisis. You're becoming famous, Raphael teased one evening, reading an article that quoted me extensively about corporate transparency. I'm becoming useful, I corrected. There's a difference. You've always been useful. He pulled me closer on the couch where we'd been reading. Now you're just useful to more people. 6 months into our partnership, Anderson Enterprises had transformed entirely. The problematic subsidiaries were gone, restructured or sold to legitimate buyers. The remaining operations operated with transparency that would have been unthinkable in the old regime. Profits were down initially, but stabilizing as we built relationships with partners who valued ethical operations. We're going to be fine, Owen reported during a quarterly review. Not as profitable as the old structure, but sustainable and defensible. You've built something legitimate. We've built something legitimate, I corrected, gesturing to Raphael. This wasn't just me. It mostly was you, Raphael said honestly. I was willing to rebuild. You knew how to actually do it. The wedding planning finally began in earnest as our legal and business complications resolved. We'd originally discussed something small, but my practical nature clashed with Raphael's desire to celebrate properly. I want people to see us, he explained one evening as we reviewed venue options. Not hiding, not apologizing for what we are. I want to marry you in front of everyone who matters and declare that I'm the luckiest man alive. His romantic streak, rarely shown publicly, still surprised me sometimes. You know I don't need the grand gesture. I know. He kissed my temple. But I do. Let me give you this. We compromised on an elegant ceremony at a historic venue downtown. Not ostentatious, but undeniably significant. I invited the handful of friends who'd stuck with me through the chaos. Raphael invited the business associates who'd proven loyal during the investigation, plus Owen and the few family members he'd remained close to. One person was conspicuously absent from both lists. Did you invite your mother? I asked Raphael 2 weeks before the wedding. His expression closed slightly. No. Raphael? She made her position clear when the investigation started. His voice was flat. She said I'd dishonored my father's legacy, that I'd betrayed everything he built. She hasn't spoken to me since. I'd known his relationship with his mother was strained, but not the extent of the break. I'm sorry. Don't be. He pulled me closer. She chose his memory over her living son. That tells me everything I need to know about her priorities. Still, she should be at your wedding. You're all the family I need. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. You, and whatever future we build together. The night before our wedding, I couldn't sleep. Not from nerves, but from the surreal awareness of how far we'd come. 2 years ago, I'd been a cautious assistant maintaining careful boundaries. Now I was about to become Raphael Anderson's wife and business partner, co-CEO of a company we'd rebuilt from ethical foundations. Raphael found me on the balcony of his penthouse at 2 a.m., wrapped in one of his shirts, staring at the city lights. Can't sleep? He asked, joining me. Too much thinking. I leaned into him. I was remembering the night I drunk texted you. Best text I ever received. His arms came around me. Changed everything. I was so scared. My purse was stolen. I was stranded, and the only person I could think to call was my boss, who I'd been hiding my feelings from for months. I'm glad you called. He turned me to face him. I'm glad you were brave enough to ask for help, even when you were terrified. And I'm glad you came. I smiled, though I should probably acknowledge that your rescue was somewhat unconventional. I excel at unconventional. His expression grew serious. Camille, tomorrow we're making official what's been true for months. You're my partner in every way that matters. But I need you to know something. What? If you ever want out, if this life becomes too much or too complicated or just not what you want anymore, I'll let you go. His voice was steady despite the pain in his eyes. I won't like it, but I'll respect it. You're not trapped just because we're getting married. The vulnerability in his confession made my chest ache. Raphael Anderson, I am not going anywhere. Not tomorrow, not next year, not ever. You're stuck with me. Promise? The word held hope and fear in equal measure. I promise. I kissed him, slow and deep. For better or worse, remember? We start saying that officially tomorrow. The wedding was perfect. Not because everything went flawlessly, but because it was ours. I walked down the aisle to Raphael, waiting with an expression of such open love that I nearly cried before reaching him. Owen stood as his best man, having evolved from attorney to genuine friend through the months of crisis. Hadley, my friend from that birthday night that started everything, stood as my maid of honor. We gather today, the officiant began. To witness the union of two people who've built something extraordinary together. The ceremony was traditional in structure, but personal in content. We'd written our own vows, promising partnership and honesty and the courage to keep choosing each other through whatever challenges came. "I promise," Raphael said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "to be worthy of your trust, to build with you, rather than for you. To see you as my equal in all things, even when you forget it yourself." "I promise," I replied, "to challenge you when you need it, and support you when you don't. To build something we can both be proud of. To stay, even when staying is hard." When we kissed as husband and wife, the applause from our guests seemed distant compared to the rightness of the moment. This was what we'd been building toward through midnight strategy sessions and federal negotiations and countless acts of choosing each other. The reception was a celebration not just of our marriage, but of survival. People who'd stood by Raphael through investigation and restructuring raised glasses to the couple who'd emerged stronger. Business partners who'd given us a chance when others wouldn't, offered congratulations and genuine friendship. "You did good, boss," Owen said, cornering Raphael during the reception. "Or should I say, bosses, plural." "She's the real boss," Raphael replied, watching me talk to a group of executives from companies we were hoping to partner with. "I'm just along for the ride at this point." "You know that's not true." Owen's expression grew serious. "What you've built here, both of you, it's remarkable. Legitimate, ethical, and still profitable. Your father would be disappointed." Raphael's voice was flat. "But I'm okay with that. I'd rather have this than his approval." Later, as Raphael and I danced to our first song as husband and wife, he pulled me closer. "No regrets?" he murmured against my hair. "Not one." I looked up at him. "You?" "Only that I didn't crash that birthday party and kidnap you 2 years earlier." His smile was genuine. Would have saved us a lot of unnecessary distance. The distance was necessary. I rested my head on his shoulder. We weren't ready for this then. We are now. 6 months after the wedding, we celebrated another milestone. Anderson Enterprises posted its first profitable quarter under the new ethical structure. Not as profitable as the old regime's peak, but sustainable and growing. "We did it," I said, reviewing the financial reports in our shared office. "You did it," Raphael corrected. "I just signed where you told me to. That's not true, and you know it." "Fine." He pulled me from my chair into his lap, a habit from our early days that we'd never broken. "We did it together. Happy?" "Very." I kissed him. Though we should probably maintain more professional boundaries in the office. We're married co-CEOs. I think that ship has sailed. The phone rang before I could respond. Raphael answered, his expression shifting from relaxed to alert as he listened. "When?" he asked. A pause. "We'll be right there." "What happened?" I asked as he ended the call. "Wesley Graham wants to talk to us." Raphael's voice was carefully neutral. His attorney reached out to Owen. He's asking for a meeting. Wesley had been in federal custody for 8 months, awaiting trial that kept getting postponed. I hadn't thought about him in weeks, focused on building rather than fighting. "Why would he want to talk to us?" I asked. Only one way to find out. 2 days later, we sat in a federal facilities conference room, waiting for Wesley Graham to be brought in. Owen sat beside us, his presence both professional support and legal protection. When Wesley finally appeared, flanked by guards, I barely recognized him. The confident rival who'd tried to destroy Raphael had been replaced by a man who looked decades older, his expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that had lost significant weight. "Raphael." Wesley's voice was hoarse. "Mrs. Anderson?" The use of my married name felt deliberate, acknowledging what he'd tried to prevent. I said nothing, waiting. I asked for this meeting, Wesley continued, because I owe you an apology. Raphael's expression remained impassive. I'm listening. I spent years trying to take what you had, your business, your position, your respect. Wesley's hands were clasped on the table between us. I told myself I was fighting corruption, that taking you down would be justice. But the truth is, I was jealous. You had something real. Real power, real relationships, real legacy, and I wanted to destroy it because I couldn't build it myself. The confession hung in the air. I watched Raphael process it, his face revealing nothing. Is this supposed to make me forgive you? Raphael asked finally. No. Wesley shook his head. Nothing makes what I did forgivable. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I destroyed. Not just your old empire, but the possibility of my own future. I lost everything trying to take yours. You lost everything, I said quietly, speaking for the first time, because you partnered with criminals and made promises you couldn't keep. Raphael didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourself. Wesley's gaze shifted to me. You're right, and that's the hardest part. If I'd focused on building something legitimate instead of tearing down what you had, I might actually have succeeded. Instead, I'm going to prison for 20 years while you two are building exactly what I claim to want. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Why tell us this? Raphael asked. What do you want? Nothing. Wesley's smile was bitter. I can't ask for anything. I just wanted you to know that you won. Not because you were more ruthless or better connected. Because you were willing to change. To become better. I never learned that lesson. After the meeting, Raphael and I sat in the car outside the federal facility, processing. Do you believe him? I asked. I believe he's had time to reflect on his mistakes. Raphael started the engine. Whether that translates to genuine change, or just regret at getting caught, I don't know. Does it matter? Not really. He pulled onto the highway. He's going to prison. We're going home. The story's already over for him. Ours is just beginning. That evening, we returned to the penthouse where this had all started. The same apartment where Raphael had brought me after my drunk text, where we'd planned our counterattack against Wesley, where we'd slowly transformed from boss and assistant into partners. I have something for you, Raphael said after dinner. He led me to his home office, where a large gift-wrapped package waited. I opened it carefully, revealing a leather portfolio embossed with our names. Inside were documents. Deeds, contracts, articles of incorporation for a new charitable foundation. What is this? I asked, reading. The Reyes Anderson Foundation. Raphael's voice was soft. Dedicated to helping people in crisis. Legal assistance, financial support, protection for those who need it. I looked up at him, tears pricking my eyes. Raphael, you asked for help once when you were stranded and scared. I want to build something that ensures others can ask for help too. That they don't have to be alone when their lives fall apart. The gesture was so perfectly Raphael, practical and romantic in equal measure, addressing both immediate needs and long-term vision. We'll fund it together, he continued. Run it together. Make it something that actually makes a difference. Consider it my apology for all the nights you've lost sleep cleaning up my messes. I kissed him, tasting salt from tears I wasn't sure were his or mine. You know I don't regret any of it. I know. His arms tightened around me. But I regret putting you through it. So let me build something good from all the bad. Let me turn your drunk text into something that helps others. We stood there in his office, holding each other. The foundation documents scattered around us like promises of better futures. 2 years after that birthday night when everything changed, I stood on the balcony of our penthouse, watching the city wake up. Behind me, Raphael was still sleeping, exhausted from yesterday's board meeting where we'd announced the Foundation's first major initiative. My phone buzzed with a text from Hadley. 2 years since your birthday disaster. Should we celebrate with another club night? I promise to guard your purse this time. I smiled, typing back. Dinner instead? Somewhere quieter. I'll bring my husband. Husband. The word still felt new and precious, even after months of using it. Raphael emerged onto the balcony, wrapping his arms around me from behind. What are you thinking about? How much has changed? I leaned back against him. 2 years ago, I was a cautious assistant hiding my feelings. Now I'm married to my former boss, running a company we rebuilt together, about to launch a foundation that might actually help people. Any regrets about that drunk text? His voice held amusement. Not even one. I turned in his arms. Best mistake I ever made. It wasn't a mistake. He kissed my forehead. It was the bravest thing you'd ever done. Asking for help when you needed it. Trusting me when you had every reason not to. And you came. The simple truth still amazed me. Without hesitation. Always will. His voice was firm with promise. That's what partnership means. You text, I come. No matter what. Standing there with the city spread below us and the future stretching ahead, I understood that we'd built something far more valuable than any business empire. We'd built trust, partnership, the certainty that whatever challenges came next, we'd face them together. Come get me, I'd texted that night 2 years ago, desperate and afraid. He'd come, and he'd never stopped coming, never stopped choosing me, never stopped building with me rather than for me. We'd turned a midnight crisis into a morning celebration, a drunken plea into a partnership that transformed both our lives, a moment of vulnerability into a foundation of strength. Ready to go change the world? Raphael asked, echoing words he'd said countless times during our restructuring. With you? I smiled. Always. We went inside to start another day of building something better. Together.